Hello, my name is Nana. I'm 13 years old. I'm from Vietnam. Now read The Labors of Hercules. Introduction. The legendary feats of Hercules were among the most beloved myths of the ancient Greeks and Romans. Hercules was immortalized in the art and literature of the period, and he was idolized immortalized in the art and literature of the period, and he was idolized as one of the greatest of heroes in the Greek and Roman pantheon. His adventures were depicted in sculpture and retold in poetry, and his likeness appeared on coins. What made his story so compelling? Perhaps part of his hero's allure lay in the intensity of trials he had to overcome. The greatness of Hercules' accomplishment was matched only by the depth of his suffering. Zeus, Zeus, king of the gods, was famously unfaithful. His wife, Hera, tolerated his infidelity, but when she discovered that his affair with a mortal woman named Alcmene resulted in the baby Hercules, she unfairly swore revenge on both Alcmene and her child instead of Zeus. Hera sent witches to torment Alcmene and in childbirth. She also sent snakes to murder the infant Hercules in his crib, but Hercules, precocious and immensely strong even as a baby, strangled the snakes and survived. Hera didn't relent, however. Tortured by Zeus's infidelity and unable to take her anger out on him, she watched Hercules grow up, continually devising ways to cause him pain and suffering. When Hercules married, Hera hit upon one of her cruelest stratagem, stratagem, stratagems. She sent Hercules into a fit of violence, causing him to murder his wife and children. When Hercules regained his senses, he saw the spectacle of his family lying dead on the floor around him. Grief-stricken, he pleaded with the god Apollo to grant him absolution, because Hercules' crime had been so grievous. Apollo sentenced him to perform 10 labors for the tyrant Eurystheus, king of Mycenae. To cleanse his spirit, Hercules would need to submit to Eurystheus' commands and perform extraordinary feats of strength, perseverance, and intelligence. The stakes were high. If Hercules failed, he would have to live with the stain of his crime. If Hercules succeeded, however, he would gain forgiveness in his own eyes and those of the gods, and he could more move forward with his life. Hercules' strength and resourcefulness. Several of the adversaries Hercules overcame in his labors were terrible monsters that required courage and skill to defeat. Some, like the Hydra, were mythical creatures with supernatural powers and the gift of immortality. To defeat these, uh, Hercules had to utilize resourcefulness and creativity as well as strength. Others, like the Nemean lion, the beast Hercules had to overcome in his first labor, were creatures of great viciousness and cunning. The Nemean lion combined vicious tenacity with near human intelligence. For example, the lion used women he kidnapped as bait to draw warriors to her rescue. As the men approached, the lion would leap out and devour them. Hercules would use a different tactic. He began by firing arrows from afar, straight as the lion's heart, but they simply bounced on off its hide. He tried throwing a spear, but the weapon did not pen- penetrate. Finally, Hercules picked up his club and chased the lion into a cave. After he blocked off the entrance so the lion could not escape, he ran up to the lion and jumped onto its back, dodging fierce claws and sharp teeth. Then he wrapped his powerful arms around the lion's neck and began choking it, holding on until the lion ceased moving. He attempted to skin the dead lion, but again none of his tools would cut the hide. Finally, Hercules took one of the lion's own claws and used its razor sharp edge to skin the animal. In this adventure, Hercules demonstrated many of the qualities that would serve him well as he went to defeat the Hydra, an enormous, many headed snake, a powerful boar, and vicious man eating vultures. Hercules was forced to change his tactics each time he fought, using guile as well as strength, often turning his adver- adver- adversaries, adversaries' weapons against them, just as he had with the Nemean lion. Obedience to King Eurystheus was one of the subtlest features of Hercules' punishment, as Hercules performed labor after labor, demonstrating his superhuman strength, keen wits, and deep courage. Eurystheus, Eurystheus grew progressively more afraid of him. He was so terrified of Hercules that he forbade he forbade the warrior from being in his presence. Instead, the lion the the king issued all his commands through the messenger. Hera encouraged the king to make Hercules' trials as difficult as possible, even insisting that Eurystheus increased the number of labors to 12 after learning that Hercules had received payment for two of his labors. Hercules' restraint and prudence. However, some of Hercules' labors had to be accomplished through restraint and prudence. In fact, Hercules also had to learn not to take needless risks. These qualities are exhibited in his third labor. For this labor, Eurydice decreed that Hercules had to bring him the Serenium hind, the special pet deer of Artemis, goddess of the moon, wild animals, and the hunt. Hercules knew that he could not simply kill the animal. He could not risk the anger of two goddesses. Carefully and patiently, he began to track the hind in the hills outside Serenian, Serenia, waiting for the beast to tire. After a full year, he closed on the hind as it was sleeping. Hercules swift feet. He hoisted it into his shoulders and set off them for Mycenae. Mycenae. When Artemis confronted Hercules, understandably enraged at the capture of her pet, Hercules was straightforward and honest with her. He recounted how he had fed off violence and murdered his family, how he had taken on his labors as penance for his actions, and how Eurydice Eurystheus now required that he bring the hind to Mycenae. Artemis had compassion for the suffering hero and allowed him to take the hind on the condition that he returned it to its native habitat after the labor was complete. Hercules kept his word to the goddess and won her favor through his mercy and honesty. Hera, however, was merciless and in her hatred of Hercules. When Hera saw how Hercules had successfully negotiated a peaceful resolution with Artemis, he became determined to use Hercules' qualities of prudence and restraint against him. She saw her opportunity in the ninth labor, the episode of the Belt of Hippolyte. For this labor, Eurydice instructed Hercules to travel to the land of Amazons, the tribe of fierce female warriors. Hercules was ordered to bring back to the belt of Amazon's queen, Hippolyte. Hercules knew he could not fight Hippolyte and all her warriors on his own, so he took an army of friends on board the ship that would sail to the country of the Amazons. Neither he nor his crew had any quarrel in the Amazons. They hoped not to clash with the Amazons at all, but rather to visit peacefully. As their ship drew near the shore, Hercules exclaimed in a great voice, Hippolyte, Hippolyte, I have a boon to ask of you. The Amazonian warriors exchanged untrusting glances with one another, and their spears did not waver. Then, slowly, a woman emerged from the ranks. I am Hippolyte, she announced to Hercules. What is your errand? Hercules retold his story, just as he had done with Artemis. When she heard his tale, Hippolyte was sympathetic. sympathetic. She told Hercules that she would grant the belt to him out of compassion. All seemed well, and Hercules down to a feast with the Amazons. But Hera seized the opportunity to pass among the Amazon in disguise. She sowed rumors that Hercules was about to betray their trust and kidnap the queen. The warriors murmured among themselves, and they forced to slay Hippolyte and take the belt from her. He fled with his friends to his ship and returned to Mycenae with the belt and a heavy heart. Amazing Amazons. The Amazons were a mythical tribe of fierce female warriors celebrated for their skills in horsemanship and archery. Shunning men, the Amazons created their own society exclusively for women. Greek and Roman poets and artists often featured famous heroes such as Theseus and Achilles in great battles against Amazonian queens. Amazons are often recognizable by their colorful, patterned clothing. Hercules' ingenuity. The most decisive factor in Hercules' successful completion of the labors, the quality that enabled him to solve problems no mere mortal would have been able to overcome, was his ingenuity. He was consistently able to think his way through obstacles that seemed insurmountable. insurmountable. When Eurystheus mandated that Hercules clean the stables of King Augeas, for example, Hercules came up with a particularly creative solution. King Augeas was one of the wealthiest men in Greece. He owned thousands of cattle, but he had not cleaned his stables in more than 30 years. The job was enormous and filthy. Undaunted, Hercules set to work by smashing two large holes in a stable walls, one on each side, and then digging a canal from nearby river to the stable. The river flowed into the canal, through the stable, and away, carrying years of accumulated filth with it. Hercules was not above the use of trickery to accomplish his goals either. He successfully outsmarted a number of adversaries in the course of his labors, including the god Atlas in his 11th labor. For this labor, Eurystheus demanded that Hercules fetch one of Zeus's golden apples. As Hercules journeyed in search of the apples, he learned that they were located in a garden no one was permitted to enter. The garden was guarded by a group of nymphs called the Hesperids. Only the nymph's father, Atlas, could enter unharmed. Hercules immediately set off to find Atlas and considered how he might persuade the god to help him. He wondered whether he should retell his story, hoping for Atlas's sympathy, or whether he should concoct a plausible lie instead. Hercules found the god groaning under the weight of an unimaginable burden. It was Atlas's responsibility to hold the whole world on his shoulders. Atlas's giant shoulders cracked and strained under the weight, and his cries of pain were pitiful to hear. Hercules asked, "Great Atlas, how would you reward me if I relieved you of your burden for a short while?" Atlas replied, "No reward would be too great." He readily agreed to enter Zeus's garden, retrieving an apple while Hercules bore the weight of the world in his place. Atlas, so overjoyed to be free of his burden, did not want to take it up again when he returned. He told Hercules that he would take the apple to Eurydice himself if Hercules would wait for him, sustaining the weight of the world on his shoulders. But Hercules, sensing a trap, laid his own. He agreed to wait for Atlas if only Atlas would take up the weight again for just a moment while Hercules arranged himself comfortably. As soon as Atlas lifted the world on his own shoulders again, Hercules fled with the apple. Hercules had once again combined wits, fortitude, and brute strength to successfully complete a labor that should have been impossible for a mortal man. Do you know Hercules is a Latin name used by ancient Romans, ancient Greeks called the same hero, Heracles. In both languages, his name means glory of Hera, possibly an attempt to please the often wronged Hera. In ancient Greek and Roman art, Hercules is almost always shown with two symbols: the Nemean lion skin worn as a helmet and cape, and his wooden club. Hercules, the immortal hero. In his final task, the hero descended into the underworld, the invisible land of the dead that the Greeks believed was located at the remote ends of the earth. His mission was to capture Cerberus, the three-headed dog that guarded the entrance to the underworld, keeping the living separated from the dead. Hercules overpowered the beast easily, and by completing his final task, Hercules had finally absolved himself of his murderous crimes in his own eyes and those of the gods. Hercules earned forgiveness and the opportunity to continue on with his life, cleansed of his heinous offense. After the conclusion of his 12 labors, Hercules went on to accomplish numerous all other heroic heroic feats. His next marriage to a woman named Deianira was also ill-fated. When Hercules and his new wife were traveling, a centaur named Nessus offered to transport Deianira across a deep river while Hercules made his own way. Midway across the river, Nessus began to assault Deianira. Upon hearing his wife's desperate and panicked screams, Hercules Hercules swiftly shot off an arrow that he had dipped into the poisonous blood of the Hydra, one of the monsters he had conquered during his labors. As Nessus bled to death, he told Deianira to take some of his blood. If she wove some of this blood into a cloak and gave it to Hercules, he said, it would ensure to his fidelity to her. Later, when Hercules and Deianira had become alienated from each other, he remembered the blood. He wove a cloak and gave it to Hercules, who wrapped himself in it, only to be instantly seized with unendurable pain, wild with agony, unable to wash the poison from his skin. Hercules commanded a great pyre to be built. He lay down in the flames, hoping to perish and end his torment. Zeus looked down upon the pyre from his home on Mount Olympus and was, at long last, deeply moved. Turning to his wife, Hera, he said, "Has he not suffered enough?" Hera, for reasons all her own, consented. Hercule consented. Hercules had demonstrated that he was mighty and courageous beyond human expectation. Hera and the other gods raised Hercules up in a pillar of fire to Mount Olympus, where he lived as a demigod forevermore.
Good job!
Goodbye.